this time is the title of the one we looked at last week, but I'm going to talk to you about what the circumstances are behind this psalm when we get to our notes later. It says, to the chief musician, so it's supposed to be sung and instruments played, upon Neganah, a psalm of David. Hear my cry, O God, tend unto my prayer. From the end of the earth will I cry unto you, when my heart is overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For you have been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. I will abide in your tabernacle forever. I will trust in the covering of your wings. Now remember, we don't read the word Selah. That's just a musical notation, or it's a sign of stopping the music for a moment to meditate upon it. For you, O God, have heard my vows. You have given me the heritage of those who fear your name. You will prolong the king's life. Remember, David is the one writing. You will prolong the king's life and his years as many generations. He shall abide before God forever. O prepare mercy and truth, which may preserve him. So will I sing praise unto your name forever, that I may daily perform my vows. Now with that in mind, let's sing number 462. 462. The title of it is Hiding in Thee, but it's all about the Lord being the rock that is higher than I am. 462. Go ahead and play a couple lines in case there may be some who aren't familiar with this. So let's go ahead and play it one time. Okay, now notice at the top, right under the title, it has lead me to the rock that is higher than I. And what is the reference?
Psalm 61:2.
How about that? Okay, that's why we're singing this tonight. All right, let's sing on together in the first verse. Oh, safe to the rock that is higher than I, my soul in its conflicts and sorrows would fly. So sinful, so weary, thine would I be. The blessed rock of ages, I'm hiding in thee, hiding in thee, hiding in thee. The blessed rock of ages, I'm hiding in thee. On the second, we'll stop after the second. We'll sing the third one at the end of the message. On the second. In the calm of the noontide, in sorrow's lone hour, in times when temptation casts o'er me its power, in the tempest of life, on its wide heaving sea, thou blessed rock of ages, I'm hiding in thee, hiding in thee, hiding I'm hiding in thee. So just set the hymn book aside where you can get at it. We'll sing the third stanza after we study this passage. So let's look at Psalm 61. Go to your introduction, if you would, please. So you may have noticed as we were reading through, this psalm describes circumstances in David's life when he was far away from Jerusalem, because he talked about the ends of the earth in the early part of the psalm. And the tabernacle, he was far away from the tabernacle as well, and outside the Holy Land proper, as indicated by the words from the end of the earth in verse 2. And his desire was to be able to be at the tabernacle again. He wanted to be there where he could worship with God's people and pay his vows, as he says at the end of this psalm. Offer his vows, giving thanks for all that God had done in his life. Moreover, he was experiencing some traumatic events in his life, as is shown by the fact that his heart was faint, verse 2. 3 historical periods in his life have been suggested as possibilities. The first 2 we're not going to accept, but let's look at them just briefly. Some have suggested that these circumstances describe when he was in Syria fighting a battle against the Syrians. You still know where Syria is. It's in the same place today, okay? The nation of Syria. And he received the devastating news while he was up there of Edom having attacked the nation of Judah, or the nation of Israel, against the southern part of Israel. You'll see that description in Psalm 60, by the way, but we're not looking at that tonight. However, that situation doesn't well explain why David feels like he's shut away from the tabernacle, because Jerusalem wasn't affected, and he could still go back to Jerusalem when he chose. He wasn't kept from it. So he voluntarily left on that military campaign, and he was going to return when he was finished. Moreover, an enemy attack would not necessarily threaten his divine right to the throne, because it didn't affect the capital city whatsoever when Edom attacked the extreme southern part of the land. And it would not keep the promise from being fulfilled that God had given him in 2 Samuel chapter 7. Remember when God told David, you will never lack an heir on the throne. You'll always have descendants ruling on the throne of Israel. And of course that culminated in what king? What king made it a forever, that the throne would never be vacated? The Lord Jesus Christ was the ultimate fulfillment. So that circumstance doesn't really fit. A second suggestion that has been made is that the time of his flight was when he was running from Saul. And Saul attempted to kill David and prevent his rule. 2 primary facts seem to rule that out. The reference to the king. He wasn't a king yet. Yes, God had chosen him, but he had never taken the throne of Judah while Saul was still alive. And he refused to do anything to kill Saul or get rid of Saul. He left that up to God. And so that the king is referred to in verses 6 and 7. So this shows us it's a time when David had already assumed rule, and it wasn't at a time when he had only been promised rule. Also, the mention of God's tent or the tabernacle and David's desire to dwell there can't speak of the time when he was running from Saul, because where was the tabernacle? At that time, the tabernacle wasn't even in Jerusalem. It was in the house of Obed-Edom, because the Philistines had captured it a number of years ago, and it had never been brought back to Jerusalem. And David had to do that. You'll read that in 2 Samuel chapter 6, where David actually brings the ark back to Jerusalem. And so this doesn't fit either. So let's look at the third one, which I believe has to be the right one. This psalm was written during the time when his son Absalom had come into Jerusalem, and David and his men had to flee. And they fled across the Jordan River, and they went way up north on the Transjordan on the other side of the river, really out of the primary area where the nation of Israel was living at the time. And so this seems to fit the psalm much better, as we mentioned there in number 3. Now let's get a better picture as to how David put his confidence in God by reading that passage in 2 Samuel chapter 15. This is the situation where I think David wrote this psalm, when Absalom was chasing him and trying to destroy him and all of his army. but God, of course, gave them a victory. 2 Samuel 15, verses 24 through 26. So this is talking about, right before this, it talks about the people that went with David across the Jordan River. And then we pick up in verse, they were running from Absalom. And we read, and to Zadok also and all the Levites were with him, bearing the Ark of the Covenant. See, they brought the Ark of the Covenant with them when Absalom had come into Jerusalem, because they didn't want him getting control of all of that. So David had the priests carry it with them as they left. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had been done passing out of the city. And the king said unto Zadok, carry back the ark of God. David said, I don't want you to leave it here, because who knows what could happen to it in a time of battle. We don't want the ark of God here, so take it back. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, notice the if, he will bring me again, and he will show me it and his habitation. So he has had him take it back. But if he thus says, I have no delight in thee, David, behold, here I am. Let him do to me as it seems good to him. So he's trusting his life to God. He's putting himself in God's hands. And then we also want to read verses 30 and 31 down just a little bit further. And David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and wept as he went up, and had his head covered. And he went barefoot, and all the people that was with him covered every man his head. And they went up weeping as they went up the Mount of Olives. That's right when they left Jerusalem, they had to go up over the Mount of Olives, down the other side, and down the long road that led down past Jericho, where the Jordan River was. And they ended up crossing the Jordan and going way up north once they got across. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray you, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Did God answer that prayer? He did. Because Ahithophel gave him advice. And actually, Ahithophel gave him good military advice. But David had sent back a man named Hushai, which was also a trusted counselor. Hushai sided with David. And David said, I don't want you to come with me. I want you to go back to Jerusalem, and you can help thwart the plans of Absalom. Be very careful, but see if you can help thwart them. And so Ahithophel gave his advice, and everybody said, that's good advice, Ahithophel. But then Absalom said, let's hear from Hushai. Hushai's here too. And Hushai said, no, don't pursue them right away, because they are like bears robbed of their young. They're very angry and very upset. This isn't the time. You need to gather a larger army and go up after them, and then make sure you can defeat them. And that was the kind of advice that David wanted, because that gave him and his men time to escape and to get in a safe place and get prepared. And so God did answer David's prayer here in what he said in 2 Samuel. So it's always good to know the historical background when we're looking at a passage of Scripture, so it helps us understand better what's going on. Now, let's look at the little paragraph before we begin the outline. When we read the Psalms, we shouldn't just be looking at things that happened in the past. It's nice to know what David did, what the circumstances are, and what happened to David. But what about us today? How does this apply to us today? We need to understand that the same things that David found in the Lord, we can find in the Lord. We can find his strength, we can find his help, we can find his guidance in our lives. And we must understand the principles that David puts forth here and apply each one of them to our own personal lives. And that's what we're going to try to do tonight. And so we see here, I noticed the words in italics that I put right near the end of that paragraph. God is with us too. God strengthens us. God delivers us. God keeps his covenant faithfulness with us. And you're going to see that in the passage, the idea of covenant faithfulness with us. And God will make it possible for us to keep our vows to him and rejoice in him forever. I hope you folks have made some vows to the Lord. We may not offer sacrifices when we make vows today, but we promise things to God. We tell God, this is what I want to do, Lord. This is how I want to live. we need to make sure we pay, quote, pay our vows to God as well. When God hears and answers our prayers, and when God blesses us, and when God meets our needs, we need to return the favor and dedicate ourselves even more faithfully to God for the rest of our lives. So, the main point is God will lead you to the rock that is higher than you. Yesterday I was sitting in Pastor George's office, and he put a new painting up on the wall. Actually, it was a picture that was put in a frame, I'm sure. Beautiful picture of the Superstition Mountains. And I pointed at it and I said, I've been up on the top of that twice. I didn't go by helicopter. I hiked when I was a little bit younger. I could do it today, but it would take me a lot longer, and I'd be a lot more out of breath than I did the first 2 times that I did. But after the first time, I said to myself, I don't know why I did this. This is hard. It was a very difficult hike. It's a very quick ascent. This Grand Canyon is hard, but it's a gradual trail that goes up the Grand Canyon. It's still hard, right? And it's much longer. But going up that is very quick, and you're really worn out by the time you get to the top. And then coming down, my legs felt like rubber coming down that mountain. But anyway, that's not what this is all about. But what I'm mentioning it for, think of a rock like that, a high rock that's solid and strong. Getting up there, you can look out over your circumstances in life and know that God is in control. God is that rock. God is that rock, that strong fortress. And that looks like a fortress when you look at those mountains out there, Superstition Mountains. They look like a fortress, don't they? And so what a beautiful picture we have here. So God will lead you to the rock that is higher than you. So first thing we need to do is do what David did. We need to cry out to God in our distress. In verse 1, he says, hear my cry, O God, listen unto my prayer. So wherever you are, even from the end of the earth, look at verse 2. From the end of the earth. Now, he wasn't literally at the end of the earth, but he was like 50 or 50 some miles away from Jerusalem. And when you walk it, that's a lot longer than when you go 50 miles in a car. Now, you can go to Phoenix and drive 50 miles. And you can do it in about an hour, maybe less. But when you walk it, and when you're going up and down the hills, etc., like they had to do, it's a tiresome journey. So he's figuratively saying, from the ends of the earth will I cry to you. When my heart is overwhelmed. His emotions were drained. How could this be happening? How can he, the powerful king of Israel, be chased out of Jerusalem by his own son? By his own son. Now, I'll give you a clue. He did some very bad parenting that led up to that problem. He was a powerful and a good leader, but he was a terrible parent. Sorry, just read the book of Samuel, and you'll see what happened, how he treated his kids, how he let them get away with things without making them stand to account. And anyway, yes, all this happened, and his heart was just overwhelmed. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. So whatever your emotional state, so wherever you are, whatever your circumstances are, whatever your emotional state is, whatever my emotional state is, God is still our rock to whom we can go. Even if we've been part of the problem. You might say, well, I don't have a right to ask God's help because I messed up a lot. And that helped me to get into the place I am. Well, that may be true. But David had messed up a lot too, and yet he knew he could cry to God, and he knew God would be faithful. And God would forgive him, and God would answer him, and God would strengthen him. And he did. And so will he do to us. However impossible the circumstances may seem, the rock is higher than you. You cannot ascend that rock in your strength. You'll need God's help. So that's the first point. Any comments on that before we look at verses 3 through 5?
So, Pastor, he was a king at that time.
He was the king. Oh yeah, he'd been the king for a number of years. This was probably past the middle of his reign, and he reigned for 40 years, so this was past the middle. I don't know how far past. I don't know the exact timing. We could probably calculate by how old his sons were, that sort of thing. Yeah, he'd been the king for a long time, right? And he was booted out by his own son. Now, let's also remember verses 3 through 5, God's past provision. Did David get help from God all those years. He was running from Saul for like I think it was 10 or 15 years. I can't remember. It was a long time. And it was a long time that he was running from Saul. Was God with him during that time? Did God help him then? Did God help him to find hiding places in literal caves and rocks? He did. He was down in the wilderness, and there were caves, there were rocks, there were lots of places to hide. And he would think of all those kinds of things when he thinks of God being his rock and God being his hiding place. So he remembers his past provision and protection, and God had promised him his hospitality and his shelter. Let's read verses 3 and 5 again. For you have been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. I will abide in your tabernacle. What's a tabernacle, folks? Tent, exactly. Now, I will abide in your tabernacle forever. He's thinking of the tent of meeting that hasn't actually been, the actual tabernacle hadn't been, well, yes, they had a tent. Okay, I take that back. At first they had no tent, but David brought the Ark of the Covenant back to Jerusalem early in his reign, and then he put up the tent. He put up a tent and put the articles of furniture for the tabernacle in it. So there was a tabernacle there when David was king, but there was not a temple. He wanted to build the temple, remember, but God said, no. You have too many wars. You're a man of blood. I want this built during peaceful times. And so he said, your son will build it. And he did. So he's saying here, I will abide in your tabernacle. I'm going to get back. I'm going to get back to the place that I really long to be in, where God's presence is manifested. And I will trust in the covering of your wings. And we're going to comment on this in the next little paragraph here. All these parallels, all these pictures that we have here in this psalm. So look at the next words. Notice how David keeps getting closer and closer and in a more personal relationship. He starts off with a high rock, back in verse 2. From a high rock, high craggy rock, because the word in the Hebrew has the idea of a rough, craggy rock, sort of like the Superstition Mountains, okay? Then he goes to a refuge further defined as a tower of strength. And so, verse 3, for you have been a shelter. The idea is there is and for me, and also a strong tower from the enemy. So a tower of strength. Now, a tower is not a natural object. It's something that someone builds. And so you're getting humans involved when you have a tower. Then he talks about personal hospitality. Look in verse 4. I will abide in your tabernacle forever. So that's personal hospitality provided within the tent of his host, which is God, of course, and the resulting safety among friends. Look at the last, and I shall trust in the covert of your wings. Then to an affectionate parental shelter symbolized by your wings. So each little description gets closer, more personal. So the shelter of the wings is a picture of the mother bird. Have you ever seen a mother bird covering her little ones, protecting her little ones? My wife told me something that I didn't get to see. She said, right on our street, Ayrshire Trail, where there's no water, unless there may be some swimming pools, like in my backyard, but there's no bodies of water there. She saw a duck with 7 little chickies following after her right on our street. I'm thinking, what in the world are they doing there? That's not a safe place for her to lead her little duckies. But the mother will make sure she keeps them together, and she will protect them. And oftentimes, when they're really little, she covers them with her wings. So a picture of our God. Think of that. Tenderly loving us and caring for us like a mother bird does its little chicks. And that's as helpless as we are before God, like those little chicks are with their mother. So that's what we see in this whole section. So let's look at the details just briefly. God has been a refuge, even a tower of strength, verse 3. God has been a refuge. I already just read that. God will allow David to dwell in his tent forever and to take refuge in the shelter of his wings. That's verse 4. And then verse 5, God has heard his vows along with his prayers. Let's read verse 5. For you, O God, have heard my vows. Otherwise, when David prayed and said, Lord, I'm in a desperate situation right now. I really need your help. God, Lord, he's not bargaining with God. But Lord, help me because I want to go back and I want to worship you and I want to pay my vows. I want to show my thanks and gratitude for what you're about to do for me. And so that's what he's saying. For you have heard my vows. You have given me the heritage of those that fear your name. Otherwise, other people who fear God, reverence God, respect him highly, deeply, and honor him with their lives. He said, you have done that for me, which you have done for others who also fear your name. And then he says in verse 6, you will prolong the king's life and his years as many generations. Now, how could he be sure of that? Is he just being presumptuous there by saying, you're going to make my life longer and you're going to preserve and you're going to make sure that there will be many generations following? How can David say that? I think you know the answer to that. Some of you know it, I know. What is the answer? Do you remember 2 Samuel chapter 7? When David wanted to build the temple, God said no. We already mentioned that. God said, no, you can't, but your son will do it. God said, no, you can't build my house. I'm going to do what? What did God tell David? I'm going to build your house. Read it. Go back and read it sometime. I'm going to build your house. And then he said, that's where he promised him. Ruler after ruler after ruler. He said, there will never be lacking a ruler. You say, but what about the time after the exile when there weren't any kings in Israel? But there still had not been another ruler outside the line of David during that whole time. And then Jesus came. And Jesus became the ultimate fulfillment of a ruler from the house of David. You see, when I wanted to point this out when Anthony was, I think Anthony was doing the lesson, I think it was maybe on Sunday morning, where he was talking about, oh man, I just lost my train of thought. What was I looking at? Oh yeah, about those that there would be others, there would be many generations. You will, and your years as many generations. And so I can't remember the point that I was going to make. I apologize for that. I had it on the tip of my brain. I don't know if that ever happens to you. But there would be many generations because God had promised him that in 2 Samuel chapter 7. And so David knew he could pray that. He knew it was going to happen because God had already promised him that he would have an heir that he chose. And it wasn't Absalom that he chose to rule after him. It was going to be his son Solomon. By the way, interestingly enough, the son that God had chosen to succeed David, who was his mother? Solomon's mother was Bathsheba. Think about the grace of God. That was his worst sin in his entire life, that adulterous relationship with Bathsheba and then having her husband killed. And yet God made him suffer for it greatly. He didn't let him get off easy, but he forgave him and he allowed him to still rule. He didn't kill him. And then he allowed the son from that woman to become the next king.
But didn't they lose their first son?
Oh yeah, the baby that was born from the adulterous relationship died. That's what I'm saying. He had to pay the price. He had to pay the price. But God was still gracious. That wasn't in the notes, by the way. That's free, what I just shared with you there. Okay. All right. So we see in that beautiful passage, God has heard his vows along with his prayers, and God has given David his inheritance belonging to those who fear him. In David's case, it involves the land rights and possessions, but especially it involves the divine promise of a throne, a house, and a kingdom from 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 16. So, remember, we also, when we're going through difficult times, we need to remember and be encouraged by what God has done in the past. Think to your past. Think what God has done. And when you think things are going to fall apart, things are desperate, there's no hope, I can't see the end of this road. It's very murky and confusing. I don't know how things are going to be. Maybe things are going to fall apart. Remember God's past dealings in your life and how God has always been faithful. And you can be confident that God will get you through whatever you're going through in the current time. Then thirdly, he looked forward to the fulfillment of all of God's promised benefits, and we need to do the same thing. Look forward to the fulfillment of all of God's promised benefits to you. Look at verses 6 and 7. You will prolong the king's life and his years as many generations. He shall abide before God forever. Oh, prepare mercy and truth, which may preserve him. Now I want you to notice something in verse 7. The words mercy and truth are two of my favorite words in the Old Testament, and you hear me say this a lot because these words are used over and over again in the book of Psalms. So I'm going to repeat myself, and I'm not apologizing for it because it's here. Mercy and truth, those words in Hebrew would be emeth, truth or faithfulness, and kesed, which is, mercy, I'm reversing them. The word truth is the word that can also mean faithfulness, and that's the word emeth. And the word mercy is the word kesed, which I have rendered loyal love. His loyal love and his faithfulness, those are how you can put those two together, his loyal love and his faithfulness. David says, you will use those attributes of yours to take care of my life and bless me in the future. He knew God would do that. Now, in my life and my ministry, there were times I made some mistakes. Quite a few times. But some mistakes were big ones. And one of the biggest mistakes I made was in the very first ministry that God gave me. It wasn't anything bad or immoral that I did, nothing like that. It's just a poor decision that I made. It led to bad consequences. And I knew that I had messed up. But here's the good news. God doesn't throw you away like an old dirty wash towel. Oh, this is so filthy. Throw it in the garbage. Nope, God doesn't do that. God can restore, and God can still bless you in your steps in the future. And I've seen that in my life. I've seen it. I can guarantee it to you. If you are faithful and if you trust God, God will do the same thing for you. And David is the one who gives us his testimony of the same thing. So the details there, it won't take us long to look at them because we've already talked about the general idea. God says he will add days to David's life. He will make his years as generation and generation, talking about his sons coming after him, ruling. And then God secures the king sitting on his throne forever. No earthly king. Now, it was a common practice back in that day, and I'm afraid it still happens today. They would say when they wanted to flatter the king and be on his good side, they would say, "Oh, king, what? Live forever." Did any of them ever live forever? Nope. Not even close to it, okay? But how can David say that? You will enable the king to sit on his throne forever. We've already answered that 2 or 3 times tonight. Because the Lord Jesus Christ. David did not know the details of the coming of Christ, but he knew there was going to be someone coming to take his throne. He didn't know all the ways that God was going to work that out, but he knew that God was faithful and God would do that. And boy, did he do it. And then God provides as guardians his most special divine attributes. I love these so much. I've actually read a book on the word kesed. It's maybe 120, 30 pages long, but it's on that one Hebrew word, kesed, which basically means loyal love. I studied this word a lot because I was an Old Testament major when I went to grad school. And it's just a powerful, powerful word. If you understand that word, it's helped me so much in my life. I have known people that have betrayed the ones that have helped them in the past. Maybe it's their parents. Maybe it's their grandparents. Their parents or grandparents do something they don't like and they walk away and they won't have anything to do with them. All of us know people like that, don't we? I have known parents that have betrayed their own children and left them. My oldest brother had one boy. I won't get into the details, but he and especially his wife, treated him like dirt. I witnessed it early on when he was just a little boy of 7 years old, and they basically put him down so bad right in front of me. It was just heartbreaking. And then when he got older, he got married this girl that they didn't like, not because she wasn't a Christian, but because they just didn't like her as a person. And so they never saw him or his wife or even the child they had after that. Never saw him. And my brother died without ever seeing his grandchild. Now you tell me, that is not keeping loyal love, is it? But so many people in this world do things like that. It's heartbreaking. Now, my own alma mater, Bob Jones University, there were some things that happened over the, not in the last couple of years, but a little bit before that, where the things that were happening that I wasn't very happy about, things that were going on that I thought, oh no, Lord, don't let this school fall apart like so many other schools have. Well, God didn't. But I know people, many graduates, who turn their backs on BJU and they get on these social groups on the media. I hate social media sometimes. They get in these media groups and they're putting down their own university from which they graduated. And I've said many, many times, I owe so much to that school. I know what I was when I went to that school. I know the changes that God worked in my life because I was in that school. I became a person I never would have been if I had not gone there. And even when I got into teaching faculty there for my while I was in grad school, I was teaching English and I was also finishing my degree. I began seeing some things that I didn't like real well. Some of the decisions that were made and some of the treatment of people that they let go from their faculty and people that some were my friends, it bothered me a lot. And I know a lot of people that when things like that happened, they turned away from the school and they started blasting them, putting them down. And I said to myself, I will always be faithful to this school. I can disagree where they're wrong, but I'm always going to be faithful. That's what loyal love is all about, folks. You don't give up, you don't quit easily. Not whether it's a school, whether it's family member, whatever it is, you show loyal love and do it throughout your life. And God is saying that here. David is saying God will have his loyal love and his faithfulness, his mercy and truth, they're translated here in the KJV, which may preserve him. That'll preserve. God's loyal love and faithfulness will preserve our lives. And then finally, keep your vows and sing his praise forever. Verse 8. Verse 8. Trust in him. Oh, excuse me. I'm looking at the wrong psalm. So I will sing praise unto your name forever, that I may daily perform my vows. The Hebrew simply says day and day. It has the word day twice. And so we get the idea in English, day after day. And that's probably a good way to put it. Day after day. It will always be one day follows another, involving both frequency and regularity. I want to do this every day, and I want to continue to do it. Normally, a vow is paid in a single ceremony in the tabernacle, but David thinks of what cannot be dispatched so quickly. It continues. We continue to show loyal love and faithfulness back to God for all the loyal love that God has showed to us. And that idea of loyal love applies to your relationship with God. You owe it to him. That's part of the relationship that you have with him. And no matter what happens in your life, you don't start blaming God. You don't turn your back on God. You don't stop being faithful to God. You have to trust him. He has shown you in the past who he is and what he's like. He will show you in the future. And then, so the last couple of points there. David thinks, I already read that, he will make his whole life one continuing paying of vows. His debt to God can never fully be paid. Remember that song that says, it's the song about love for God. The love of God is so great that if you had a pen, you would drain the ocean dry. If the ink were filling the oceans, you would drain it dry, writing all the aspects, the manifestation of the love of God. And so it is. You can never repay God. Never. Don't even look at it as a repayment. Just be faithful back in return. In conclusion, George Herbert, in a song called "The God of Love My Shepherd Is," put it this way: Surely your sweet and wondrous love shall measure all my days. Otherwise, he's going to experience it all his days. And as it never shall remove, it's never going to stop. So neither will my praise. Don't ever let your praise stop. You owe it to God. Yes, God will lead you to the rock that is higher than you. Therefore, you will be able to keep your vows and sing his praise forever. And if you want to see examples in the future where we will literally be singing his praise forever, read Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 to 5. It goes on forever. We praise him forever. With Revelation chapter 5, verses 11 to 14, one of my favorite passages in the Bible, where all the universe praises God. All the universe, even the ungodly, have to admit it. Even the ungodly have to admit it. All the universe praises the Lord. Any comments as we close tonight? We actually have a couple of minutes if you wanted to ask a question or make a comment or an observation. Anybody want to share anything or ask anything?
How did you spell the word Kesed?
Kesed. In English, we would spell it Chesed. That's a rough way we would spell it in English. Chesed. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Emeth, if you want to know what that is, the word for faithfulness is Emeth. Emeth. These words are used numerous times, especially, well, in the Old Testament because they're Hebrew words. But they're very special words. And a lot of times you'll see them together like we have right here. A lot of times. Any other questions or comments? Okay.